In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna been on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now with today's guest, your host, Chris Bair.
Good Saturday morning, everybody. This is the Legacy of Agriculture show with Chris Bair. We'd like to welcome you to this show. It's a brand new show on WNAX and also on Apple and Spotify and podcasts as well. We have started this program because over 30 plus years of traveling throughout the United States, I've had the opportunity to meet many, many people that have wonderful stories that I consider to be legends in agriculture. Their family stories have helped agriculture and helped agricultural families throughout the many years. And after a couple of years of consideration and thinking about how to start the show, I couldn't think of a better family to start our program with than the Grossenberg family, based out of Winter, South Dakota. Those of you that are from the Midwest know Grossenberg Implement. And my first guest on the show is Barry Grossenburg. Barry, thank you for coming and participating with us.
Well, Chris, thank you. This is great.
Your family, I've known your family for well over a decade now, and an absolutely wonderful family. I know your son Charlie and your son-in-law Adam Sievertson. Very wonderful families, and you've done a wonderful job in agriculture. But I want to hear your story. I would like to hear and bring to our listeners the story about the Grossenberg and family and how you started back in the early 1900s, late 1800s in the agricultural business and then into the implement business. Tell us a little bit about your family and its inception.
Well, C.J. Grossenberg was born in Rock Valley, Iowa in 1898, and his aunt and uncle homesteaded in Tripp County in 1909, the elders. And C.J. would go out as a young man and help hay or whatever, and he fell in love with it. In 1919, 21 years old, he bought 2 quarters of land north of Winter by Hamel, South Dakota.
That's so their inception truly was the turn of the century into the 1900s as well. So he married early?
Well, he married, my grandmother was a school teacher, and she was 21, and CJ got married in 26. She was out there school teaching, and anyway, CJ's sisters back in Rock Valley were going to go get married, 2 of them, and they got halfway to Rock Valley, and Blanche and CJ said, well, we might as well get married too. And why I can remember that so well is all 6 of them were back at CJ and Blanche's home in 1976, so all got married at one time. It's about the kind of actions that CJ and Blanche were. They got things done.
So that was 50 years, and they all got together to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. That's very interesting. So how did CJ get started in feeding cattle in the early 1900s, and then eventually started buying and selling a few tractors? Tell us about that.
Cattle feeding in western South Dakota did not exist, and it was all mechanism. It was horses, and he had 10 hired men. My grandmother worked side by side with him. My grandmother never cooked a meal in her life. She stayed in the truck with him. She worked in the silage pile with him. They worked all the time. And what happened is the fat cattle had to go to Sioux Falls or Sioux City or Chicago on a train, and Blanche and CJ would get on a truck and load up 6, 7, 8 fats and go to Sioux Falls, and they'd drop them off and drive right back. So they worked their tail off getting these animals over there. And what got him, Chris, he got to look in 37, he got to see mechanism coming. And he saw these tractors. He says, well, I'll start bringing back these John Deere tractors, a backhaul. And that's exactly what happened in 37. He started hauling, he signed a contract in Clome, South Dakota, and he started selling tractors to Tripp County.
And if I remember right, he'd haul cattle into the market, and then he'd fold the sides down on the old, probably an old single gas, single-sided truck, and load those sides down, load a brand new tractor on top of the truck, tie it down, and then come back home and sell the tractor.
Yeah, it was easy. from 37 to 41, it was easy to sell stuff. No one had money, but they had livestock. So CJ would trade for livestock and take it east and bring back tractors. I bet he got 2 or 3 tractors, them little tractors on. And so a number of tractors from 37 to 41 was incredible. He just kept driving back and forth, and that's what got him started.
Well, back in the 20s and 30s, the internal combustion engine was just starting to take off, and John Deere had developed the horizontal 2-cylinder engines. That was a big deal to agriculture back then, especially when you were farming with horses.
Yeah, and that hydraulic hoist that you used to shovel that manure on or the silage on, you had a hydraulic hoist because of the tractor, and they would lift it up. It was an incredible change. That tractor and them hydraulics really changed agriculture.
So CJ saw the opportunity in trading cattle and hauling cattle to really east, and then loading up equipment and coming back west. When did the Grossenbergs have their first opportunity to be a dealership?
Well, 37, we were actually a dealer in Cologne, and 2 years later in 39, the John Deere dealer in Winter was just a hardware store. So CJ bought his John Deere dealership out and moved it for the winter and moved into an old lumber yard in 39. And they stayed there till 60 when they built a new store.
So what did you do when these new tractors were coming on board? I doubt there was very many people that understood an internal combustion engine as well as the carburetor and the ignition system and the PTO and transmission and all of that. How did CJ overcome those obstacles?
He had one hired man, and he would help them. Like you said, Chris, you almost had to help them get started on tractors, and but it was all about service too. Even at we've always been strong service people. Even at an early stage, we saw that service was everything to implement business.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Service and parts and taking care of the customers after the sale is vitally important. I can only imagine some of the conversations that CJ and Blanche would have in that old truck going down the road when it was 100 degrees outside in South Dakota or 20 degrees below zero going across the country, and cattle in the back as they go east and equipment as they come west. It would have been interesting to be a part of some of those conversations. And now we're into the 40s, talking about the war and what was going on with the Grossenberg family. Thanks again, Barry, for joining us. Tell us more. I mean, this is almost like sitting at a buffet and just taking in the history of the Grossenberg family. Tell me what happened next. We're into the 40s, where electric started, and your grandfather had signed a contract with John Deere, and he's now hauling tractors back and forth.
Yes, Chris. And after the war, everything was money making. They sold Cadillacs and Oldsmobiles and cars and tractors, and actually they bought a ranch in 44, a big ranch in Mission, for $1 an acre, 10,000 acres. And he had Claude Lamro run the place because he was a part Indian guy, and so he was ranching out there too. It was a remarkable purchase. But so after the war, everybody was looking for machinery, and machinery is hard to get, but we had a big allotment, and I think that took us a step ahead of everybody in the early implement business. And my dad was born in 30, and he just loved to sell anything. He went to high school. He'd come after school and sell a Cadillac, sell an Oldsmobile, do this and do that. Just everything was selling. Dad said it was remarkable. I mean, the war was, everybody wanted something, and CJ and Blanche and Jean, they had product to sell. In the rest of the story, my dad did not want to go to school. He didn't want to go to 8th grade. He just rather be home selling and be in the implement business. And his school teacher mother made him go to school, high school, made him. And Dad said, I didn't want to, but
that's right. His mom was a school teacher.
Blanche was a school teacher. So anyway, here comes out of high school, and he comes out of high school, and Blanche says, you got to go to college. And he says, So anyway, he goes to Brookings for a year, and he'd take a Cadillac, a car or something, sell it, and come back and forth. And he'd do that. He did that for a year, and he had a brand new trailer house, and he never went to one class.
Is that right?
Never went. And anyway, I said to Dad, "How did you not get in trouble with your dad?" And he said, "Well, my father, CJ, didn't know what 0.00 was." He says, he closes, "That's a good deal. You go to work." And so he come home, and about a year later, my mom and him get married, and everything's going great. And Korea comes, and my dad gets in the middle of a Korea that you can't believe. Goes to Korea as a foreign observer, and he goes through 3 units. 11 men went into Korea with him, and only him come home. And each one of them saw him die in front of him. And so it's remarkable that I don't know how he got through that. And anyway, a kind of a side note to that, he talks about it and stuff like that once in a while. So I make this sign that says 11 men in, 1 man out in Korea. And this was just about 2 months ago. And I go to Dad, and Dad looks at, "Oh, God, that's nice of you, If you don't talk much about it, you don't get very emotional." So he wasn't very emotional. He says, "I got to tell you another one." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, we were sitting in this pit and in this calling in fire, and they said, 'Get the heck out of there.' The first guy goes out, and the shell hits him, and he says, 'This whole body and whole guts blow me into the deal, and not a scratch.'"
Wow.
But anyway,
so it was a miracle that he came out of Korea and came back to South Dakota and was able to carry on with the family business. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So your dad is still alive and still doing pretty well, and your mom is?
No,
as well?
My mother died at 43, cancer, and Dad kind of bacheled around. He was a bachelor for 10, 12 years, about killed him, but he got through it and remarried a nice lady, 10 years younger than Pat, and they get along great and everything's super. But Dad's mind's good, and he still comes to the shop and interested in everything we're doing, but he's doing good.
Now, you guys bought a store here recently in Beersford, and I stopped in to say hello to one of your guys there, and I saw your dad there, and he was in there giving orders. He told them to get the pickup loaded up. He had parts he had to deliver to customers, and he was on his way to Sioux Falls, and he wasn't stopping.
No, he's he's short. My dad, CJ gets a lot of credit because he's the first guy, and Blanche did it, but honestly, Gene Grossenberg made Grossenberg Implement. He had the charisma and the stuff to go out, and CJ was just a cattle feeder. And Dad, I give him the credit for getting it off and going. And he went out and hustled and got stuff sold.
Now, you guys, just as a sidebar note, you have a few cows. I know Charlie talked a little bit about having some cows around. Is that just for the grandkids?
That's just for stress relief or something.
That's just for fun.
Just for fun, yeah.
Well, you can say that the Grossenbergs are still in the cattle business for about 120 years, right?
Yeah. We like cattle, but I had a bunch, and I'm glad I sold them. They're a lot of work. The one that got me about 3 winters ago, we had 2 twins on Sunday in the shed, and all 4 of them die. I said, "Man, this is the great Sunday," and it's just fun. So, that cattle business, those guys earn every penny they got. They work their butt off.
So now, if I do my numbers right, Barry, we're looking at fourth generation.
Yeah,
now.
Charlie is.
So
Charlie's 40 years
generation.
old. Yeah, he's 40 years old, 4th generation.
Wonderful family and good people. So after the war, and your dad comes back to the war, when do you establish in winter? I know you have a monstrous, huge building up on the hill, and you got a tire shop there, and you got fuel islands there, and when did this all really start to take off and grow for the Grossenberg family?
Chris, we're going to talk about a tornado that took our one place, but what started the growth of us, we were downtown, and right next to us, a big Massey dealer just burned right to the ground in 1960. Okay. And so in 60, we bought 40 acres on west of Winter, and we took the top off, and we put a brand new steel baling building. And so the fire thing was deal. That deal right there was a change too. That really we said, man, we got to get rid of this. We got to get going.
Right.
Yeah.
So you put the baling bin up because you were afraid of fire from the Massey Ferguson dealer that had burned down in 1960. That's pretty neat. And I want to go back into our first segment. You were buying land. There was land to be bought for $1 an acre, West River.
Yeah. And right at the war is out in the reservation Antelope Ranch. Sold for $1. It's 10,000 acres. And Dad, CJ would run yearlings and stuff out there. And this is a story in 49. Dad's 18, 19 years old, and CJ asked, Mr. Lamro was sitting right there with CJ, and CJ says, I'll sell it to you for $100,000. That's $10 an acre.
Right.
So he made a lot of money. And Dad was there, and CJ said, you want to be an implement dealer or a rancher? And Dad said, an implement dealer. And Wonderful. So they sold the ranch. And the side note to this deal, CJ sold it for $100,000. Butsy Dam came in the next day. And he says, CJ, I'll give you $110. And he said, no, you don't.
He said, nope. No deal.
No deal. Shake.
No deal.
But Claude took good care of the place. And actually, that's Barry Dunn's homestead. His the SDSU that's a Dunn. Family. And so,
nice.
Yep.
And tell me about your growth from the 60s on.
The growth from the 60s on was we had a building. We had a good building, good service in a big area. We didn't have a lot of competition West River. It was us, and so we were selling big tractors, summer fallowing, Steigers. Mostly, we sold a lot of big Steigers, 60-foot chisel plows, and we were the only guy in town. And so our growth in tractors grew tremendously. In 62, which was 125 years, as John Deere we were invited to East Moline, and we were the second largest John Deere dealer in the United States in 62. So we had a tremendous growth, and we stayed that way. Our big tractors kept selling, our big equipment kept selling. We had service guys that lived in Pierre, and we had a service guy down in Atkinson that lived there all the time. So we were a little bit ahead of everybody in getting big, and we stayed big at the winter site.
So when you're selling these big tractors back in the between 1960 and 1970, was there a lot of financing, or did guys have to come in and pay cash? How did you get somebody into a new 300 horsepower 4-wheel drive tractor and a 60-foot chisel plow?
Well, they financed them. We financed them mostly through the bank. And we never had much problems. Seemed like people were financially all right. And when people ran into bankruptcy, I think it was some of the implement dealers' fault because he didn't get enough money down. We were always not hard, but we said you got to have a third down and make a payment in the fall. And that was our mentality. I know it helped us a lot. We didn't chase people in bankruptcy. We've had a few, but not a lot.
Well, that's a wonderful way to do it for sure. The one thing that I've noticed about your John Deere dealership that's a little bit unique from the others is you have a massive tire store on several of your dealerships. I know that in winter you've got a big tire store there. You've got a tire store in Sundance, I believe, and why tires as a John Deere dealer?
Well, in 37, 38, CJ was at a deal in Firestone. Harvey was there, and they were putting rubber tires on these steel tread. CJ was selling steel tread, so he actually met Firestone. He was the first for tractor deals, and so we started selling tires in 37. We kept selling, and to this day, the tire business is good for us. It mixes really well. We're a little young at some of the stores. We'd like to get all the stores to get like Winter, have the tire business, and because it fits well for the implement business.
One thing that I noticed about Grossenberg Implement is that sales are always important. I mean, if you don't have a sale, you don't have anything behind it. But Grossenberg's actually has a extremely impressive service department, and it appears to me, in my experience with Grossenberg's, is that service and selling those parts is more important than anything is. Tell us about your philosophy with on the service side, and especially in the 60s and 70s.
You're exactly right, Chris. We were service. We'd have service trucks out all over the place. We worried about service. We had our own diesel pump, and so we focused on service heavily, and I think it helped us a lot. We got things fixed.
When a guy in those of you that are not from South Dakota, when it's January and February and you're knocking on calving season, you got a tractor that won't start and run, and you can't feed those mother cows, you can have a problem really fast. And so being able to generate that telephone call to Grossenberg's and say, hey, I got a tractor down, I got an injection pump out, or I've got a starting problem, or won't hold a charge, I need somebody out there, that becomes more valuable than the sale does to those ranchers and to those row crop farmers as well. So wonderful service. So into the 60s and 70s, Winter was your flagship, and it has always been your flagship. And I remember the first time I walked through your shop here, it's probably been about a decade ago. Your shop never ended. Do you just keep building? I was so impressed with the size of the shop, and I was also very impressed that at the time you were doing all kinds of injection pump work and injection pump service on all makes and models and trucks, and tell us about that portion of your service. Why the massive buildings? And why all of the attention to detail to tires, injection pumps, injectors, starters, alternators? Why was that so important to Grossenberg's?
Well, Chris, we're out a long ways from everywhere, but it just seemed every time we added a facet to it, it was good for us and good for the rancher farmers. And we're way out. West River, we're way out there, and we got to have everything. And every time we added something, it worked out good for us. And to say the reverse side of it, injectors pumps disappeared. Our pump station's gone because they don't do. Our radiator, we used to have lots of radiators. Radiators are gone, so it's coming full cycle. Some of them places are disappearing, but the size of the place we'll add a 40,000 square foot building there within the next couple of years, because not so much. It's just the size of everything, Chris. Everything we sell is big, from a 60-foot air seeder to a 36-roll planter to a big tractors. We gotta get bigger.
Well, back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, if you had a good tandem axle truck tractor and a tandem axle hydraulic beaver tail trailer, you could haul 90%. But now that doesn't even hardly haul the lawnmowers anymore.
It don't.
So massive transportation is becoming a massive issue in the implement industry as well. So tell me a little bit. We're Charlie and is fourth generation. He's the CEO for Grossenberg's. I will never say that you're retired, Barry, because you have too much energy to be retired. But you also have your son-in-law that is the CFO down in Wayne, Nebraska. Tell me a little bit about this integration and how that's working, and what your goals are for the future.
Well, Chris, Adam's married my youngest daughter, and Adam's got a different personality than Charlie. And Charlie's he's got this personality. Adam's got a great personality that matches them, so they don't have this button head deal. They get along really well. It's a good combination. Those guys run the place. They make the decisions, and you can't second guess. My dad never second guessed me.
Tell us a little bit about your growth. I know that you've made some great store acquisitions. You've moved into Wyoming. Now you're here into eastern South Dakota. Tell us a little bit about the future of Grossenberg's, Barry.
Well, in 2005, John Deere's had all the ownerships together, and it says we're going to be less owners. They told us that in 2005. You're going to buy or sell. There's no more mom and pops. And they told everybody, and it put a big lip on everybody, including us. But in 2007, Pierre and Phillip came for sale, and that's the first acquisition. That was that's the first time. It was easy to run the implement business, just one store, and we did it. Now we had three, and then that acquisition was a good one, and it fit us well. And then we in 12 we bought 4 stores down in Nebraska, closed one. It was a real small store. And in 19 we bought Sundance and Bell, and just now we bought Beersford. And each one, they say, how do you manage that? Actually, technology, we get to see everybody's books every day. We can see the profitability. The key is to get a good store lead at each store, and we got 9 of them, and I really think we got good store leads at each store, and they're all in with us. The boys, we train all the time. We actually do our own service training with Wendy Stevenson, and we could expand some more. We're really happy that we got Beersford. It fits us really good, and it's worked out so far.
Now, there's a little bit of history behind the Beersford store, and correct me if I'm wrong. Beersford was the last independently owned John Deere dealer in South Dakota. I know that, but is that the last independently owned John Deere dealership in the Midwest? Or
no, I don't know, Chris, but Randy Bach was the last single store owner in South Dakota. There's no more.
That's an interesting piece of history, because that's very significant to South Dakota, and what a better fit to come into a good South Dakota family like the Grossenbergs are. So one thing that I have noticed about the machinery with Grossenbergs is the Grossenbergs stores on the west side of your area responsibility versus now what you've got in Beersford is vastly different. I mean, you'll never catch a big 90-foot planter out in Sundance, Wyoming, or Belfouche, but in the same token, there's a lot of the equipment out there you won't be able to. So how does that work into your trading?
It kind of works good, Chris. You know, the new ones are sold here, the planters, and a good used planter will go out to Myrtle or Sundance or whatever. And so they're not selling as much new stuff out west, but the good used stuff that is used East River goes out there, and it's very good shape. And works well. So
the tractors, some of the tractors that are first generation, second generation, 5 and 10-year-old tractors work very well out west, and they probably get used to, in some cases, to the end of its useful life, and so it works very well into your trade. So what is Thanksgiving dinner like at the Grossenbergs?
I got 3 kids and 9 grandkids. So each kid had 3. We got the oldest is a girl, and then we got 7 boys and 1 little 5-year-old granddaughter. So Thanksgiving is a big deal at our place.
I bet it is. I noticed not long ago on Facebook you were all golfing together down in Wayne. Was it in Wayne?
Sandhills. Everybody in May golfs at Sandhills. We don't bring the grandkids, thank God, but no. But we all go there. Yeah, our families, all our families, really tight, and we like each other, and we're blessed to have good everything. The kids are doing good.
Wonderful. So I've got to ask you, you've had a tremendous amount of experience in the implement business. So those of us that are a little bit younger, I want to ask some advice. If you were sitting in front of a 16, 17-year-old young man, he wanted to stay in agriculture, whether it's production agriculture or what was the implement business, what advice would you give him?
Well, you got to get your education. You got to get through school. I don't care if it's a 2-year school, a 4-year school. Do not just sit on the farm. You got to get away from the farm. You got to get educated, and you come back. And then don't let Dad say, we don't need to buy that quarter either. Each farm's got to grow somewhat. And these young guys, the way to get a young guy involved is find some land or sign something, have him buy it, take a note, get him broke, so he has to stay there. And if he has ownership of the farm, he will stay. But if you treat him like a hired man, you ain't going to have generation deals.
It's not going to stay, is it? He's got to have a little bit of
pie. And then just keep giving piece of the pie. I mean, if Dad's 60, 70 years old, sell him at half the price some land so he can make the payments. In 20 years, he got to pay for, and old Dad's got half the money. He don't need. Grandpa don't need that much money.
Yeah. That's great advice. And the other thing that I noticed about the Grossenberg family that's very common with very successful families is the work ethic. I know that you work a tremendous amount. I don't think you've ever worked a 40-hour work week. I think you've always been 60, 70 hours a week, haven't you, Barry?
Well, I've never taken a Saturday off. If I'm home, we're at the shop doing something. But we love what I'm doing. I love our place. We got great employees, and our customers are great. And the only thing we pray every day for is rain.
Pray for rain. That's exactly right. Well, folks, this is Chris Bair with the Legacy of Agriculture. We appreciate our first guest ever, Barry Grossenburg from Grossenberg Implement. We appreciate Barry, and we appreciate our sponsor, Pifer Auction Realty and Land Management.
$500,000 bid.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bair, sponsored by Pifer's Auction Realty and Land Management. Call Pifer's at 605-836-2277.